Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Moe Carrick joining us. Moe is the CEO of an awesome business name called Moementum out in Bend, Oregon, which is a consultancy providing services in culture, people, leadership, and team dynamics. She's also the author of When Work is Good, What It Means, Why It Drives Results, How You Can Build a Workplace People Love. Welcome to the show, Moe.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Delighted to be here.
Yes. So before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please tell our listeners the short version of your story.
Well, at my age, Andrew, it's hard to have a short version, as you know, but I'll do my best. So my story is that I started my career dreaming of being a journalist. I wanted to be a scoop. I was an English major, and I ended up not doing that. I was a wilderness guide in college. I grew up in the Rocky Mountains of the West, and loved being with groups of people on the outside. So after I left, I was like, I'm not really going to write. I'm going to lead trips in the wilderness. So I worked for Outward Bound and the National Outdoor Leadership School. Loved that work. Eventually burnt out. Had decided that being a scoop wasn't really likely because there's this whole deadline thing, especially in, newspaper writing that was like really challenging. And I had an editor in college who was like, you know what? I don't think this is a career for you. Maybe books, but probably not daily news. So I was just sort of searching, and I loved my work with groups. I was going to be a social worker. That was the path that I thought, because I worked in the clinical realm with kids in the wilderness in the 80s and 90s, which dates myself a lot, back when therapeutic application of adventure as a catalyst was really very young. But I was kind of burned out of that work. So a friend of mine was enrolled in school studying something called organizational development. And she said, why don't you come with me, just to school one day? This could be fun. So I did. And lo and behold, it really kind of pivoted. So I hung up my polypropylene in my hiking boots. I joined corporate America after grad school, and worked as an internal consultant, and then as an external consultant, and then founded my business 23 years ago. So that's
fantastic. So I also ask the accelerant question. Is you going to class, was that the key accelerant for your career, or is there another story that just really accelerated where you are right now?
It's such a good question. I would say yes, that was an accelerant for sure. Like kind of exiting clinical application, moving more into systems work was powerful. But there are others, aren't there? As we go through our lives, other things that we look back and we go, oh yeah, that was an accelerant. In thinking about your question, one of the other accelerants that really, I think, came to me was when I did join corporate America. So having worked in the nonprofit sector, working in clinical applications for most of my career as a young professional, it felt really terrifying to go and work inside of high tech. I was in the cellular industry back in the day before it was digital. I worked for a really inspired CEO by the name of Craig McCaw, who had a vision that someday we'd have a chip in our head that would do our banking and do our, daycare. And we were just like, this guy's crazy. But he wasn't crazy. Now we have all of that in our, handheld device. But for me, having had a lot of opinions about corporate America, joining corporate America was very much an accelerant for me around both the realization that everyday people work inside business, and also that change is available in every system. So I think just that move, which took a lot of courage for me to do, and also a risk on the part of the people that hired me, was a really important one. That's another.
Yeah, I'm teaching management class at our local university. I have 28 wonderful students. And, this mindset that you and I grew up with and folks are still growing up with today is that, I graduate from college and all of a sudden I'm going to be fully formed and I'm going to go out into the world of work and it's going to be so much better than all the BS that I've got to put up with right now. And then you get out into the quote unquote real world and you find out very quickly that high school never ends.
Right.
So
It's true.
Yeah. So that's our segue into culture, because that's going to be one of the main things we're talking about today. Everybody's talking about culture and its benefits to results and teamwork, engagement, et cetera. Tell us about Moementum and what makes your consultancy stand out from what most leaders view as just a sea of leadership development consultancies.
Yeah. I think of Moementum as the consultancy that is, first of all, bespoke. So, as an organizational development consultancy, we're not offering really off the shelf solutions, although we certainly have approaches to our work. But I think the ability to really listen to a system and intervene is one of our sweet spots on behalf of that unique system. I mean, most people in organizations think that their system is completely unique. We know differently, right? The threads and the themes are the same, but it's still really important to be able to intervene in a way that meets the needs of those leaders in that system at that time, which I think is something that makes Moementum really special. Part of what that's about is that we really are focused on small businesses. So small business is 500 employees or less and up to 100 million, usually 10 to 100 million. It can be more. We have the big ones in our suite. We've worked with the top big five, et cetera. But I think those businesses that are, around 500 employees, less than 500 employees, maybe just over up to say 1,500, which is still medium, but still pretty small. Those businesses are really different than the ones that make all the media attention in terms of leadership and culture, which are the big ones, the mega companies. So I think serving that niche is I think kind of part of our sweet spot as well.
Yeah, you and I are very much aligned there. At Kaplan, I ran about a $350 million portfolio scattered around the world. But in relative terms, it's still a pretty small business. And we had a lot of founder to kind of startup to proper, fully formed business challenges happening. And culture really takes a hit when the founder, you experience this great growth and the founder still thinks that they can do it all, they know it all, and but they can't remember everybody's name anymore. And you have team members that are now fighting at cross purposes to one another, different mindsets and goals kind of getting injected into the organization. So I appreciate the work that you're doing there, because companies that size have very, very unique problems. They're not completely far gone like the big gigantic ships, right? Well,
right, which gives them more agility, doesn't it? Right, they have more agility, they have more flexibility. They're often looking for those points of scale, which could be investment, it could be merger and acquisition, it could just be product niche, market fit, whatever it is that they're doing that's going to give them the gravitas that they're looking for. But you named something really powerful, which is that the nature of culture in organizations we think of as organic, right? It starts with the founder and his or her team, and it evolves, from there. Every touch point of the organization's journey has the potential to impact culture and actually can impact culture. So it's not as straightforward as it looks when you get to be a much bigger company where culture is slower to change and a bit more entrenched in the system. When you're smaller, you have that agility. You also have the opportunity to really shape culture, but usually that's happening in the beginning at a very unconscious level. So right. A lot of the work we do is around how do we make what has been unconscious conscious, especially as the founder maybe moves away or exits the organization or begins to move into a different role. So it's definitely a living process, the way that we see it. I'm sure the way you've experienced it.
Yeah, getting the work and getting as close to the work as possible and getting that back into the frontal lobe where it's, where it's present, that going to the Gemba or going to where the actual work happens is some of the most impactful advice that I give leaders, especially when they're on that, that transition from startup into, a larger proper business. So
right, which is also often when they can afford to look at culture, right? Because in the beginning, you really can't. You're too focused on survival. You're focused on sales. You're focused on product market fit. You're trying to get your team assembled, and then there comes this magical point where you're like, oh, okay, now we have something here. Isn't this cool? And we want to grow it. Now we all of a sudden start looking at, oh, wait a second, what is our culture? And that's, of course, all about how you can attract and keep the really awesome talent that you need, which starts to become one of your critical success factors at scale.
Or, oh, wait a minute. Gosh, I hired a few genius jerks that really helped me get from here to there, but now they're totally infecting my culture. What do I do?
Totally. Or maybe I am. Right. I mean, we both have worked with endless inventors and, people that develop their product, let's say, who are very attached to it. It's their baby, but they're not actually hardwired to run a company. So that's a painful transition as well to, some make it and decide they want that journey. Some sell and decide they want something else. But I think there's no sacred cows when it comes to looking at how a company grows from the founder.
Yeah, when I point my finger at somebody else, there are three more that are pointing right back at me.
That's right. Darn it.
Then my thumb is wandering off somewhere. I'm not quite sure what it's representing, but yeah.
It's a good image.
For sure. So, Mo, I'm intrigued by your Leading People program that I did a little research on your website. And let's explore the difference between what you term performance leadership and people leadership. Can you provide us some insight for us on what the difference is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you caught that from our materials and from our website. That's awesome. Good job doing your research. We've evolved to differentiate between those two pieces of leadership. And it kind of comes, I think, Andrew, from what I've had as a lived experience, which is that, knowing the work I do, I have 3 books on the market. When Work is Good is my most recent. My research is solid. And at the same time, people have often said over the years, oh, you're the one who's, interested in employee happiness, or you're the one who is doing that. You do soft skills work, which, really irks me, right? Because I'm like, have you tried it? Because if you've tried it, there's nothing soft about leading people well, because
I hate that terminology. If we could just get rid of soft skills, it just gives the connotation that it's somehow easy and fuzzy and squishy.
And irrelevant, right? Yeah, it's like there's the business and then there's all the people stuff,
right?
As if it's different then. And of course, my whole, I'm hardwired, and all of my research and all of my work with clients has embedded in me a deep well of knowledge around the fact that actually leading people is the answer to the results. Leading people is the answer to performance, right? Because when people are activated in such a way that they bring their best to work, they don't leave their good stuff at home, then they're firing on all cylinders. They're bringing their innovation, they're bringing their creative ideas, they're bringing their highest partnership skills, they're bringing their courage. And when they do that, then all of a sudden, infinite possibilities open up for that entity, that business, or that nonprofit, whichever arena they're in. And it doesn't happen the other way around. We see people always talk about the most expensive thing in business is, employee churn. And I disagree. It's not employee churn. What's more expensive than employee churn is having an employee working for you who's bringing a fraction of their good stuff.
Right.
That's expensive because they're holding an FTE and they're bringing 20% of their good stuff. So the reason we landed on trying to differentiate for people leaders in our Leading People program between performance leadership and people leadership is that we still find that even young leaders, even leaders graduating, today, have inherited outdated mindsets of what good leadership looks like that over indexes on performance leadership. Now, performance leadership matters. We need to perform. We need results. Businesses need to get results. That's how they make money, which is how they have the impact in the world that they want. So I am not naive enough. I run a for-profit business. I'm in the system. I understand how business works. So performance matters. But if that's all we're indexing on, then we're not likely going to get the kind of performance we really want. And so what we try to do in the Leading People program is to help leaders themselves be self-aware enough to notice where are they most comfortable and fluent. Is it in their performance leadership, their ability to measure and count things, their ability to hold accountability, their ability to analyze data and make meaning out of their strategies and do good plans? That's all really important. But is that their strength, or is their strength activating the talents of their people for success, helping every employee in their system use their creativity, discretion, and judgment to solve the problems they face? Like, that's important too. And what we usually find is that people have a natural hardwiring or a trained ability to be stronger in one than the other, in which case we got to shore up the other one,
Right.
But it doesn't happen if you only focus on one. You're not likely going to have the impact that you want.
Right. Well, Mo, we're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll be right back and talk a lot more about culture.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, it's Andy here. I've got a new podcast I'd like to introduce you to, The Saturday Morning Muse. Start your weekend with me by exploring topics that span leadership, business management, education, and other musings that are designed to support your journey of personal and professional continuous improvement. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. And we're back with Moe Carrick talking about workplace culture. So let's shift gears to the importance of a mentally healthy workforce. Suppose you have a traditional, let's just get the work done leader, that performance leader that you were talking about before, who's skeptical about investing in the mental health of their team members. What do you do to help shift their mindset?
Yeah, and that's really common, and I would say it's common even with young leaders who have inherited the mindsets we were talking about before the break, right? A little bit,
Yeah.
Which is sort of, I think, the underpinning assumptions that are in that mindset often is like, can people leave their problems at home? Like, there's home and there's work. And of course, we know that that's not true. We know that what happens at home, shows up at work. And our well-being, our physical well-being, as well as our mental well-being, are impacting our effectiveness at work. So sometimes with that leader who is in an outdated mindset and is very focused on performance and just wants to get the work done, I find sometimes that the way in, of course, the way in, this, Andrew, is almost always to understand their story about that, right? Why do they believe what they believe? Then to begin to expand their thinking, if possible, around, is what they believe real? Is it real? And most of the time, people, almost every human I've met, has an experience with mental health in their family, in their workplace, in some situation where they've known someone or they've loved someone who's had anxiety or depression or substance use disorder or some other issue where they're really not well. And so if we can invite that leader into their own understanding of those issues, we can then segue to how might that impact the performance at work. I often say to people, leaders coming from that mindset, when we look at the 7 things people have of work, which are really our 7 things that I've written about from my research, which are really nicely supported by the most recent Surgeon General's report on workplace mental health and well-being, came out in 2023, which synthesizes those to 5 things. Most leaders look at those and they say, yeah, those things make sense. If my employees are well in those ways, they're going to be able to perform better at work. Now, the challenge becomes, and what those kinds of leaders often say to me, Andrew, and I'm sure they say this to you, is, but I'm not a therapist, right? I can't help them with their mental health issues. In which case, I'm usually saying, I understand it's not your job to be their therapist, but what is your job around helping your employees be well in all the dimensions that matter around wellness? What is your role? What do you want to do? And how can you help your employees thrive?
So, very well said. We have an epidemic of anxiety going on right now in our current economy and society. I mentioned my students at the local university. I have them all go through my personal planning guidebook and then give a presentation. And of the 28 students, probably a good two-thirds of them specifically mentioned the amount of anxiety that they have about their current state as well as their future state. And, if I'm talking to that same leader, one of the things that I like to remind them of is, okay, let's bring it back to education. Can you learn when you're hungry? Can you learn when you're stressed? You need your people to be constantly learning about new ways to work and managing for daily improvement, et cetera. And if they're freaking out about their work, about something else, that's going to impact the work. Just make that connection. And
Yes.
the light bulbs go off usually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, most people, even though they may not talk about it, have had their own moments when they haven't felt as capable as they might in this very moment. So, what we're doing in those kinds of conversation is we're increasing their capacity to have empathy and to think about the possibility that if they can tune into how the people that work for them may be doing, they're going to be more capable of helping them thrive. You raise a really good point about this age of anxiety that we're living in. And we also are living in a period of deep loneliness. Another Surgeon General's recent report around the global loneliness epidemic. And at Moementum, we often talk about workplaces that leverage the connection advantage, which is to be able to really create communities at work where people feel connected to one another, which is an antidote to anxiety because it includes learning how to be brave together, which creates a culture of belongingness, reduces isolation and loneliness, and again, helps free up people's capacity to do the hard things that the workplace requires. So I love to focus with people on the positive impact, just like you're saying, of tending to those dimensions of people's well-being in order to get the results they want.
Yeah. It all leads back to the results for that skeptical old school leader. And if you can paint that roadmap more clearly, you usually get some mental agility kicking in. So you have that same skeptical old school leader sitting in front of you right now. What's your message to them on how to get started on the journey to a healthier, more engaged workforce?
Yeah. We talk often with leaders about the three main levers to creating what the vernacular we use sometimes, which is the title of my second book, is to get to a brave space workplace, which is the kind of workplace where people can bring their highest and best work to work every day. So the three levers that we focus the most on are a conscious, brave culture, which we get at through a variety of activities and initiatives, including measuring culture, including defining really clearly your mission, your vision, your values, having plans that reinforce that. And it's not the values on the paper, it's the values in action, of course, that drive culture. So we have conscious, brave culture. We have building leaders who are good for people, which means focusing on leadership development, especially at the front line, but all the way up to the C-suite, depending on, the size of your company, who actually can build robust connection with their employees and create high engagement. Most of us know our employees primarily we know our company primarily through our immediate boss. Right. So if I'm a frontline supervisor, I have a huge role in the retention of the talent that work for me. I might have the most awesome people leader at the CEO level, but that CEO doesn't interface with me at the front line. So to that skeptical leader, I would help them figure out how can you invest in building leaders at every level that are really good for people. And then the third is to think about building the kinds of teams that actually care, which are teams that are capable of psychological bravery, of telling each other the truth, of peer-to-peer feedback, of really having healthy and cohesive teams at every level, which is, of course, the micro component or the subcomponent of healthy organizational success are going to be those team blocks that have to be high functioning at every level. So conscious, brave culture, leaders who are good for people, and teams who care. And what we'll often work with clients is like, where's the best lever for them to start? Because you can't necessarily always tackle that at the same time. So depending on their stage, their age, what their pain points are, we'll recommend that they pick the one that seems the most important and gives them the most leverage swiftly.
Yeah. Study after study keeps coming back with roughly the same number that about 70% of the variability in engagement is explained by the behaviors of the direct supervisor or manager. So yeah, you can fancy yourself the most enlightened, people-focused CEO, but if you don't have the people on the front lines leading your teams that project that same mentality where the work is actually happening, it's going to be a problem.
Well, absolutely. And something else that you're naming and pointing to, I think, Andrew, that's really powerful is that how I get to be an effective leader, an effective people leader, has a lot to do with the team that is my home team, right? So let's say you and I are executives of a 400-person company. Maybe you're the COO and I'm the CFO. How are we doing with being a supportive home team? Because you are one of the colleagues, let's say, our colleagues at that level are the ones that really need to be having each other's backs, having the hardest conversations so that we can show up really well with our direct report teams. And I find that in many organizations, we've got that wrong. I think if I'm the leader, if I'm the CFO, I think of my home team as my financial services team. But actually, that's my downline. That's not the team that's going to give me the ultimate challenge and support that I need from my own team. So I think investing in that leadership capacity also means investing in your senior-most team to be the highest performing team.
Yeah. Mo, I've seen it directly. If your CFO and your COO are fighting with each other, everybody sees that. And as the civil engineers would say, that stuff flows downstream really, really fast.
Absolutely. Totally. It's felt by the whole system. And often at an unconscious level. People don't know they're copying, but they are. They are.
So, Mo, let's have a little fun. I've got 2 lightning round questions for you. Number 1 is, I give you access to a really rudimentary time machine. You can send a very short message to an earlier version of Moe Carrick. What's the message and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
I would send the message that says, "You've got this." And I would send it to the Mo that was a young single mother of 3 children running a business as a CEO. Because I think back in the day, we were talking before we opened about our grown children. And before my children were grown, they were little. I was in the challenge that so many parents face of trying to balance, not feeling like I was balancing very well my role as a parent, my role as a CEO and as a founder and as a consultant and coach. And I think on most days, I wondered and feared whether I was enough as I watched the balls dropping. So if I could have sent a message to her to say, "You've got this," it would have been really helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Mo, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth as a leader?
I am really in a stage right now of looking at what I'm leaving behind. I've had Moementum. I've run Moementum for 23 years. I've learned so much in the process of working with my incredible clients and teams. And now I think where I'm sitting, Andrew, is like looking at the younger generations, especially coaches and consultants that are entering the profession that I'm in. I have a deep passion and I'm really on a mission to double the number of workplaces that are good for people because I believe that we deserve to thrive at work and that when we do, it's good for everyone. It's
Right.
better for our families. It's better for our communities. It's better for the world. And so I'm really interested in and trying to find ways right now to learn more about empowering and supporting young coaches and consultants into this practice and mentoring them and lifting them up to do the work that can carry on, long after you and I are gone, because I think the work is going to remain. I have a lot of hope for the way work is changing right now, but it's going to be changing always and forever. So I'm really working on my own learning about what's the difference between mentoring and developing new talent than just running my own practice. And that's requiring some different skills for me and is stretching me in some ways I find really interesting and exciting.
That's wonderful to hear. It sounds like you and I are both exercising our stewardship muscles.
Yeah, I love that word.
Being stewards of a business, of the community that surrounds us. It's been only recently, but I've really tuned into the fact that we never really own anything in this world, right? And so the house that I'm sitting in right now will someday be somebody else's,
right?
And all of the land that it sits on. So should I take from it, or should I nurture it and continue to develop it so that I can build economic opportunity through property value and set up the property for success for whoever comes after me. So that's just a really quick example. Moe, where can folks learn about you? And if you can spend just a few seconds talking about your book, When Work is Good.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for asking. So the easiest places to find me are going to be on my website, which is just www.moementum.com. It is spelled like my name. So it's MOEMENTUM. And I'm also on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram just as my name, Moe Carrick. Some of your listeners, Andrew, might be really interested in our free People and Culture Pulse Check, which is a 7-minute little sort of quiz that you can take that helps you assess how your people and culture are doing in your company. And you get a whole host of recommendations and free resources. So that's available on the homepage of the site. Love to have some of your listeners take that and engage with them in that way. And When Work is Good, which is my most recent book, which came out last year, is really intended to be a handbook for that small business leader who wants to have a great place to work in their organization, but are really not sure how it is that they can leverage their people talents to maximize their own results, but also to be a workplace that is good for people. I find that so many small business owners are they're very grounded in their values. They want to be great employers, but they're also frustrated. Employees come and they leave. They have trouble recruiting. They have younger workers that they're not sure how to engage. And so with When Work is Good, we're trying to offer a pretty straightforward blueprint and roadmap that says, here's how you can go after those 3 levers that I mentioned earlier: conscious culture, leaders that are good for people, teams who care, and really make it happen in your business. So that's what the book is about. And I would love to hear feedback if people read it or leave a review or let me know what you don't like.
Well, Moe, it's been just an absolute pleasure getting to know you today. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you, Andrew, and thanks for the great work you're putting out there in the podcast. Love listening to it.
Excellent. So my name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your colleagues. The show was produced by Nicholas Tempty, and we'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.